winter of 1828 pressed down on the small Ohio settlement of Marlowe like a suffocating shroud. The river froze early that year, trapping boats under sheets of ice that cracked like gunfire in the night. Thick fog rolled over the farmland, blotting out the pale sun and swallowing the town in silence. By February, 12 people had vanished without a trace, entire families gone overnight. 5 unexplained deaths followed, each corpse found with the same chilling signs: blue-tinged fingernails, eyes wide open as if frozen in terror, and deep crescent-shaped bruises circling their throats. The settlers whispered of a curse. The name on everyone's lips, spoken only in hushed tones, was always the same: the Hensley brothers. They were 4 in number, yet people often said it felt like more, a single entity divided into 4 bodies. Their identical pale eyes and unsettling synchronized movements left the impression of something unnatural, something not entirely human. Witnesses claimed they could stand for hours in silence, watching the woods, their heads tilting in unison like predatory birds. As the disappearances mounted, stories of the brothers grew darker. They move as one mind, a local trapper wrote in his weather-stained journal, and the woods go quiet when they pass, as if nature itself refuses to bear witness. Official records from that era are scarce. The few surviving court documents were sealed in 1830, labeled too disturbing for public release. Only in recent years, through a collection of forgotten archives and handwritten testimonies, have these details begun to emerge. What they reveal is a tale so unsettling, so deeply rooted in fear and blood, that even now it haunts the collective memory of Ohio's oldest families. Tonight, we open these forbidden pages and piece together the chilling truth of the 4 brothers who terrorized early America. This story isn't for everyone. It's for those who can confront the cold weight of history and peer into its darkest corners without flinching. As we explore what really happened in Marlowe, Ohio, ask yourself, what kind of evil could make an entire town fall silent? And if such evil still lingers in the soil beneath the old foundations, would you even recognize it before it found you? Before we begin, let me know in the comments what state or country you're listening from. Could a story like this have happened where you live? If you're ready to uncover a piece of America's most unsettling history, stay with me, because the truth of the Hensley brothers is far more terrifying than the legend. Marlowe, Ohio in 1828 was a place both isolated and raw, a frontier settlement clawed out of dense forest and unforgiving marshland. The town consisted of little more than 2 dirt roads, a handful of log cabins, a church with a cracked steeple, and a modest trading post where trappers bartered furs for salt, flour, and bullets. By day, the wind carried the sound of axes striking wood. By night, the town fell into a silence so heavy it seemed unnatural. Even in its earliest years, Marlowe was a place where fear found easy purchase. The settlement had sprung up during a time of restless expansion, when families fled the crowded eastern states to carve out their own futures on the edge of the Ohio wilderness. But progress came at a price. The forests around Marlowe were ancient and oppressive, their trees towering like dark sentinels that blotted out the sun. Local hunters told of valleys where sunlight never touched the ground, and where even animals seemed reluctant to pass. "The woods here don't breathe," one early settler was recorded saying in a letter to his brother. "They watch." Marlowe's small population, barely 300 souls, was bound together by equal measures of survival and suspicion. Winters were brutal, food was scarce, and illness traveled fast through the cramped cabins. Wolves prowled the outskirts, and stories of highwaymen or escaped convicts drifting through the forests added to the tension. People relied on each other, but they also watched each other. Secrets were dangerous things, and whispers traveled faster than fire. This atmosphere of suspicion set the stage for what would come when the Hensley family arrived. The town's geography played a role in its isolation. A single winding road connected Marlowe to the nearest neighboring town, 40 miles away. The river, once a lifeline for trade, froze solid each winter, leaving the settlement cut off for weeks at a time. In those months when the fog rolled in thick and the nights stretched endlessly, people said the line between the living and the dead grew thin. Superstition wasn't just tolerated, it was a part of daily life. Candles were left burning at night to ward off spirits. Horseshoes hung above doors, and children were warned never to stray into the woods alone, for the woods have their own rules and they take what they please. It was into this world of fear and isolation that Elias and Margaret Hensley brought their 4 young sons. Though strangers were rare, the town initially welcomed them as they did any newcomers. cautiously but with the hope of growing their fragile community. No one could have predicted the darkness the Hensleys would bring, or the way their presence would eventually unravel the fragile threads holding Marlowe together. To understand the terror that gripped this town, you have to imagine it as it was, a place where the crack of a breaking branch at night could send chills through every cabin, where the distant cry of an animal might be mistaken for something far worse. Marlowe was already a town on the edge, of survival, of sanity, and of something darker that no one dared name. The Hensley brothers would not just test those boundaries, they would shatter them. Elias and Margaret Hensley were newcomers to Marlowe, arriving in the early spring of 1819 with little more than a battered wagon and a heavy air of mystery trailing behind them. Their arrival was quiet, almost too quiet for a town that thrived on gossip and wary glances. What drew the townsfolk's attention, however, were the 4 sons that would be born to them over the next 4 years, each bearing the same pale complexion, icy blue eyes, and eerie stillness that unsettled even the most hardened settlers. The births themselves were shrouded in whispered speculation. Margaret was said to have endured exceptionally difficult labors, attended only by the town's midwife, Agnes McAllister, a woman known both for her skill and her superstition. Agnes's personal journal, later recovered from the ruins of her abandoned cabin, hints at something unnatural from the very start. On the night of the first child's birth, she wrote, "The air turned cold as the babe entered this world, his lips tinged blue as if kissed by winter's breath. His cry was faint, like a whisper lost among the trees." Similar notes accompanied the arrivals of the other 3 sons. Each birth left Margaret physically drained, and the babies small, weak, yet strangely alert. Medical records from 1828, fragile scraps preserved in the county archives, described the brothers as phenotypically identical, with marked cyanosis and unusually low heart rates. But while the doctor's notes are clinical, the townsfolk's memories are drenched in fear. One local farmer recalled how the boys, even as infants, would stare silently for hours, their pale eyes tracking shadows no one else could see. "It was as if they were listening to something beyond this world," he said years later, his voice trembling. The Hensleys' lineage was rumored to carry a curse. Margaret was said to descend from a line of isolated mountain folk, known for strange rituals and whispered pacts. Though no one dared speak it aloud, many suspected that the boys' births were marked by more than just natural causes, that the bloodline carried a darkness inherited, like a disease passed through generations. What made the brothers truly unsettling wasn't just their appearance, but the strange bond they shared from birth. They never cried simultaneously, but their breathing often fell into unison. Neighbors reported seeing them sitting in silence, moving with the precision of a single organism. Agnes McAllister's final journal entry chillingly reads, "The children speak without words. Their eyes hide secrets no tongue can tell. I fear what they bring with them in their silence." Margaret herself became withdrawn, almost as if haunted by what she had birthed. Local gossip suggested she spoke of voices in the night and shadows creeping along the walls. Elias was less vocal, but witnesses described him as increasingly pale and gaunt, often seen wandering the edge of the woods after dark, muttering to himself. The family, once seen as hopeful settlers, soon became the center of unease. By 1824, the 4 brothers were no longer children but figures of growing dread. The town's uneasiness shifted from curiosity to fear. Was it nature, nurture, or something far more sinister that had been unleashed in those births? The answer would only begin to reveal itself as the brothers stepped beyond their home and into the shadowed heart of Marlowe's darkest mystery. From their earliest days, the Hensley brothers were unlike any children Marlowe had ever seen. While other boys chased sticks and shouted in the fields, the 4 brothers moved through the town like ghosts, silent, watchful, and chillingly synchronized. Their pale faces never flushed with the heat of play, and their eyes, cold and unblinking, seemed to pierce right through the soul. Neighbors first noticed the strange behaviors when the boys were barely toddlers. Mrs. Whitaker, whose farm bordered the Hensley property, described seeing the brothers sitting motionless for hours on a fallen log, staring into the dense woods beyond. Not a word passed between them, she recalled decades later, but it was as if they were listening to something only they could hear. I felt cold just watching them. The local schoolteacher, Jonathan Pierce, kept a journal that would later provide some of the most disturbing insights into the boys' early years. On October 12, 1825, he wrote, "The boys never speak aloud. Instead, they seem to communicate in whispers that none of us can understand. When one moves, the others follow as if bound by invisible strings. Their eyes dart in unison toward the smallest sounds, yet they never respond to questions. There is something unnatural in their silence. Pierce's unease grew as he observed the boys' unusual coordination, mirroring each other's gestures, movements, and even breathing as though they shared a single consciousness. It wasn't just their behavior that unsettled the townsfolk. Livestock on nearby farms began turning up mutilated, deep claw marks, strange puncture wounds, and blood drained to a chilling degree. While wolves were blamed, many suspected the boys, who were frequently seen wandering near the scene of these attacks. No one dared confront them directly. A cold fear seemed to freeze the tongue. More troubling still were the whispered rumors of the brothers' uncanny physical abilities. One witness reported seeing all four climb the tallest oak in the village at once, moving silently and effortlessly like shadows on the bark. Another claimed that the brothers could disappear into the fog and reappear miles away, their footsteps muffled as if they barely touched the earth. Inside the Hensley home, neighbors spoke of strange noises at night, low chanting, the clinking of metal, and the unsettling sound of something dragged across wooden floors. Margaret Hensley was often seen pacing the rooms, her face pale and drawn, while Elias kept to the woods, muttering prayers or curses no one could decipher. Local lore began to take shape around the boys, weaving fear and superstition into a growing legend. Some believed they were marked by the devil, others whispered of an ancient family curse carried in their blood. The townsfolk's unease hardened into dread when the brothers were found one autumn evening standing in a circle in the forest, their faces expressionless, hands linked, as if performing a ritual older than the town itself. Despite the mounting fear, no one dared speak openly about what was happening. To accuse the Hensleys outright was to invite suspicion, or worse. And yet, the town's collective anxiety was palpable, a shadow that grew heavier with each passing month. By the time the brothers were 10, it was clear that something far darker than childhood mischief was at play. The stage was set, the silence before the storm, and the horrors to come would test the limits of what Marlowe, and America itself, was willing to believe. The Walden family was among the oldest settlers in Marlowe, a hard-working clan known for their sprawling farm just beyond the thick pines that bordered the Hensley property. The Waldens were respected and well-liked, pillars of the community who had survived brutal winters and hostile neighbors. So when they vanished one frigid night in late November 1827, the entire town felt the shock ripple like a stone dropped into still water. It began with the disappearance of Samuel Walden, the family patriarch, who had gone out to check on his livestock during a sudden blizzard. When he didn't return by dawn, his wife Mary and their 3 children grew anxious, but assumed the storm had forced him to shelter elsewhere. Hours passed, then days. Still no sign of Samuel, or any of the Walden family. When neighbors finally braved the snow to investigate, they found the Walden homestead abandoned, doors left ajar, and a table still set with half-eaten food. But most chilling of all were the tracks leading away from the house, deep impressions in the snow, as if someone or something had dragged a heavy load. The tracks led straight toward the Hensley property, vanishing near the edge of the forest. Sheriff Caleb Monroe, a man known for his stern pragmatism, led the search parties that combed the woods for any sign of the missing family. But no clues surfaced, no bodies, no signs of a struggle, no evidence beyond those mysterious footprints. His official report noted the strange absence of any animal tracks, as if the very wilderness had conspired to hide the truth. Whispers spread quickly, fueled by fear and suspicion. Some claimed to have seen the 4 Hensley brothers lurking near the Walden farm the night of the disappearance. Old Martha Jennings, a local midwife, swore she heard unsettling sounds, low guttural growls and the eerie echo of children's laughter carrying on the wind near the Hensley woods. Her testimony, however, was dismissed by the more rational townsfolk as the ramblings of a frightened old woman. But the rumors wouldn't fade. Town meetings became heated, with calls to investigate the Hensleys more closely. Yet Elias and Margaret maintained a tight grip on their property, refusing all visitors and retreating into near-total silence. Their sons, growing larger and more imposing, vanished into the shadows of the forest, unseen but never far. The disappearance of the Walden family marked a turning point. Until then, the townsfolk had tolerated the Hensleys with uneasy acceptance. Now, fear turned to suspicion and suspicion to outright dread. Parents barred their children from the woods. Hunters abandoned their traps. Even the bravest men whispered of curses and dark pacts. What no one dared say aloud was the growing pattern. Those who crossed near the Hensley property often ended up missing, or worse, The Walden disappearance was only the first in a series of vanishings that would unravel the very fabric of Marlowe. As night fell over the town, a collective unease settled like frost on every doorstep. Behind locked doors and shuttered windows, families prayed for protection from a threat they could neither see nor name. And in the dark woods, the four brothers watched, silent and waiting, their pale eyes reflecting a hunger no one would survive to describe. Fear is a slow poison, creeping into the minds of even the strongest, turning neighbor against neighbor, and casting long shadows over the brightest days. In Marlowe, after the Walden family's disappearance, fear twisted into something darker, whispers that slipped like smoke through taverns, kitchens, and church pews. The townsfolk gathered in hushed clusters, voices low and urgent. The boys, they said, they're not like us, they're cursed. Mothers clutched their children tighter, fathers sharpened knives they barely knew how to wield, and the preacher's sermons grew fiery with warnings of sin and damnation. Reverend Jeremiah Caldwell, a man known for his stern gaze and booming voice, took to the pulpit declaring the Hensley family touched by the devil's hand. In a sermon that was later transcribed and found in the church's archives, he warned, "We face a darkness that walks in the guise of flesh, four brothers bound by evil beyond our understanding. Repent or be swallowed by their shadow." But not everyone shared the preacher's certainty. Some townsfolk clung to reason, hoping to quell the rising panic. Sheriff Monroe insisted on order and investigation, cautioning against witch hunts. Yet even he could not deny the unsettling pattern of vanishings and mutilations that spread like a plague. Rumors grew teeth, stories told of strange gatherings in the woods, rituals performed under the blood moon, faint chanting heard at the edge of hearing. One farmer swore he saw the brothers standing around a fire, their faces half lit by flickering flames, eyes reflecting something ancient and cruel. They were moving like one, he said, voice trembling, like four parts of a single beast. Fear gave birth to paranoia. Vigilante groups formed in secret, patrolling the outskirts by night, weapons at the ready. Yet whenever they approached the Hensley land, an unnatural silence fell. Animals fled, the wind died, and even the darkness seemed to hold its breath. No one dared cross the invisible line that marked the brothers' domain. Religious folk whispered of a generational curse, a family condemned for sins long past, marked by God or the devil as an example. Some linked the Hensleys to local native legends of forest spirits and dark bargains, though these tales were dismissed by others as superstition. In one particularly disturbing account, a merchant named Josiah Miller wrote in a letter found decades later, "I passed the Hensley cabin as twilight fell. The boys stood motionless by the door, their eyes fixed on mine with a coldness that froze my blood. I swear they were not children, but shadows made flesh." As the whispers grew louder, so did the isolation of the Hensley family. Doors slammed shut at their approach, and neighbors crossed the street to avoid their gaze. Margaret stopped attending church, and Elias was rarely seen in daylight. The brothers became creatures of the twilight, present yet apart, part of Marlowe's fabric, yet alien to it. The town's collective dread was palpable, a dark fog settling over daily life, infecting dreams and waking hours alike. The boundary between fear and hysteria blurred, leaving the people trapped in a waking nightmare. And in that nightmare, the four brothers waited, silent and watching, their presence a constant reminder that some shadows never fade. Into the thickening darkness of Marlowe's terror stepped Thomas Avery, a man marked by skepticism and a restless curiosity that refused to bow to superstition. A former militia officer with a reputation for clear-headed logic, Avery arrived in the spring of 1828, summoned by the county magistrate to investigate the mounting disappearances and unsettling rumors swirling around the Hensley family. From the moment Avery set foot in Marlowe, he was met with wary eyes and tight-lipped silence. The townsfolk, gripped by fear, regarded him with a mixture of hope and suspicion. Most pleaded for answers, but none dared to cross the Hensleys openly. The brothers themselves remained elusive, slipping through shadows like phantoms. Avery began by interviewing witnesses, farmers, hunters, and widows, gathering fragments of a puzzle that defied logic. One by one they told of eerie sightings, four pale figures moving through the fog, unnaturally synchronized footsteps in the night, and strange symbols carved into trees near the Hensley homestead. These symbols, Avery noted in his journal, resembled no known language but hinted at ritualistic intent. With methodical precision, he examined the Hensley property. The brothers' cabin stood at the edge of a dense thicket, surrounded by ancient oaks and thorny underbrush. Avery found crude carvings etched into the wooden walls, twisting spirals, crescent moons, and something resembling a clawed hand. A chill ran down his spine as he traced the symbols with his fingers, sensing an unseen weight in the air. His investigations unearthed a chilling detail, a network of shallow pits and hidden tunnels beneath the property, long forgotten by the townsfolk. In one dark, cramped tunnel, Avery discovered fragments of cloth stained with dried blood and small bones, too small to be animal. His stomach turned as he realized he was standing on the threshold of a secret the Hensleys had desperately buried. Despite mounting evidence, Avery struggled to convince the town's leaders to take action. Fear and superstition had poisoned reason. Some saw him as an outsider meddling in matters best left alone. Others whispered that the brothers were untouchable, protected by something darker than mortal hands. As Avery delved deeper, he began to feel the weight of the brothers' gaze, even when they were nowhere to be seen. In his journal, he wrote, "They watch from the shadows, united as one. Their silence is a language I cannot decipher, but it speaks of ancient, terrible knowledge. I fear that the truth I seek may be more than this town can bear." His persistence paid off when a terrified neighbor finally came forward, revealing that the brothers had been seen near the site of the Walden farm the night the family vanished. The witness described them standing side by side, eyes gleaming in the moonlight, before disappearing into the forest like wraiths. The investigation marked a turning point. Avery was no longer just an outsider. It became clear he was the last line between Marlowe and the darkness encroaching upon it. But as he uncovered more, the question loomed. Was he chasing ghosts, or had the town's fears given birth to something truly monstrous? The once quiet streets of Marlowe now thrummed with an undercurrent of fear so thick it seemed almost palpable. As the chill of winter gave way to early spring, the town's fragile veneer of normalcy shattered. Families barred their doors at dusk, livestock vanished or were found mutilated in grotesque displays, and even the bravest men hesitated before venturing into the surrounding woods. Marlowe had become a place haunted, not just by what lurked in the shadows, but by the dread festering in the hearts of its people. Rumors spread like wildfire. Some swore they saw pale figures darting through the fog, their movements too fluid and synchronized to be human. Others spoke of strange howls piercing the night, unidentifiable and terrifying. Children trembled when passing the edges of the Hensley property, clutching talismans and praying silently. The local preacher's sermons grew more urgent, warning the congregation of an encroaching evil that threatened their souls. The town's social fabric began to unravel. Neighbors stopped speaking, suspecting one another of harboring dark secrets. Vigilante groups formed in hushed secrecy, patrolling in the dead of night with torches and muskets. Yet every attempt to confront the brothers ended in frustration. They seemed to vanish like shadows, leaving behind nothing but cold air and a creeping sense of menace. Thomas Avery, the determined investigator, found himself fighting against not just an inscrutable enemy, but the very panic-consuming Marlowe. His reports to county officials detailed the escalating violence and disappearances, but his warnings were met with skepticism, dismissed as the ramblings of a man gripped by fear. Amid the chaos, the townsfolk clung to desperate rituals. They hung horseshoes over doors, burned sage, and whispered prayers meant to ward off evil. But nothing seemed to stop the tide of darkness spreading through the settlement. The boundary between reality and nightmare blurred. Some claimed to see ghostly apparitions near the Hensley farm, while others swore the woods themselves whispered warnings. One night, a local farmer named Samuel Briggs stumbled into town, his face pale and eyes wild. He recounted a horrifying encounter, 4 pale figures, standing silently in the clearing by his barn, watching him with unblinking eyes. They weren't boys, he told the gathering crowd, but something else, something that doesn't belong to this world. His tale sent a ripple of terror through Marlowe, cementing the brothers' legend as creatures of darkness. As the disappearances mounted, neighbors vanishing without trace, livestock slaughtered with brutal precision, hope faded. Marlowe was trapped in a nightmare, teetering on the edge of collapse. The line between hunter and hunted blurred, and the brothers loomed larger in the collective consciousness, more myth than man. The town's desperation grew with each passing day. Would their fear consume them, or would they find the courage to confront the horror stalking their homes? And as shadows lengthened over Marlowe, one question haunted all. How much longer could this fragile community endure before it was swallowed whole? On a bitter autumn night in October 1828, the fragile calm that had gripped Marlowe shattered in a blaze of smoke and flame. The Great Fire, a name whispered with dread ever since, would become the defining moment of the town's descent into terror. What began as a small spark quickly consumed the heart of the settlement, leaving behind ashes, despair, and more questions than answers. The fire started just after dusk, near the trading post at the town's center. Witnesses described seeing flickering orange tongues licking the sky, while thick black smoke curled into the freezing air. Some claimed they heard screams, frightened cries swallowed by the roar of the flames. The town scrambled to fight the inferno. Buckets passed hand to hand, but the dry wood and fierce winds fanned the fire with cruel efficiency. Amid the chaos, the four Hensley brothers were nowhere to be found. Some say they watched from the forest's edge, pale faces illuminated by the firelight, unmoving and silent. Others swore they saw the brothers moving through the smoke like wraiths, their eyes glowing with a strange, unnatural light. The fire ravaged homes, the church with its cracked steeple, and the trading post, leaving ruin in its wake. Miraculously, most of the townsfolk survived, but the damage was devastating. Families were displaced, possessions reduced to ashes, and the fragile hope of recovery seemed to flicker and die. In the smoldering aftermath, whispers spread that the fire was no accident. Some believed it was an act of desperate vengeance by the brothers, a dark ritual meant to cleanse the town or hide unspeakable secrets buried beneath the ruins. Others suggested it was punishment from a higher power, a divine reckoning for the sins of Marlowe's residents. Sheriff Monroe's report, recovered decades later, hinted at suspicion but offered no concrete answers. It noted scorch marks near the Hensley property and unexplained footprints leading away from the blaze into the surrounding woods. Yet no one dared follow the trail. Fear had gripped even the law. The fire's timing was chilling, just weeks after Avery's investigation intensified and the town's anxiety peaked. It destroyed much of the physical evidence that could have shed light on the brothers' true nature, records, personal belongings, and possibly darker artifacts that only the Hensleys understood. In the weeks that followed, Marlowe became a ghost town in many ways. Those who could fled, leaving behind memories and unanswered questions. But the brothers remained, their presence growing more ominous in the eyes of the few who stayed. The Great Fire was not just an act of destruction, it was a turning point, a line drawn in ash and shadow. It marked the end of Marlowe's innocence and the beginning of a deeper, more terrifying chapter, one where fear became a living thing, and the four brothers cast a shadow that would stretch far beyond the charred ruins. For decades after the Great Fire, Marlowe was a town shrouded in silence and shadow. Official records relating to the Hensley brothers, their family, and the strange events that engulfed the settlement were locked away in a county vault, labeled with a stark warning, "Do not open," for public safety. These sealed documents, long thought lost or destroyed, have recently resurfaced, shedding new and terrifying light on the mystery that haunted Ohio in the early 19th century. The discovery came in 2022, when archivists at the Ohio Historical Society stumbled upon a rusted chest hidden behind loose bricks in the basement of the county courthouse. Inside were yellowed pages of court records, personal letters, medical reports, and even fragments of a journal penned by the town's midwife, Agnes McAllister. The documents, written in painstaking script, offered the most detailed account yet of the Hensleys' dark legacy. Among the sealed files were testimonies from frightened townsfolk who had witnessed unexplainable phenomena, disappearances, eerie nocturnal gatherings, and strange markings carved into the trees around the Hensley property. One chilling statement from a local hunter read, "I saw the brothers standing over the frozen body of a man, his eyes wide with terror, blue as the ice that killed him." Another account described a ritual performed under a blood-red moon, the brothers chanting in an unknown tongue while shadows writhed at their feet. Medical reports contained within the documents revealed that the Hensley brothers exhibited bizarre physical anomalies. Doctors noted unusual pigmentation, skin so pale it was almost translucent, and an eerie synchrony in their vital signs, suggesting a shared physiological connection. The midwife's journal alluded to unnatural births and hinted at attempts to conceal the true nature of the children, describing one of the boys as marked by signs that defy God's design. Perhaps most disturbing were letters between Elias and Margaret Hensley, discussing the pact and the legacy they sought to protect at all costs. Though the exact nature of this pact remains ambiguous, references to dark bloodlines and ancient powers suggest a secret passed down through generations, bound by fear and violence. These documents also included records of a secret trial held in 1830, in which Elias and Margaret were accused of multiple disappearances and murders. However, the proceedings were abruptly halted, and the verdict never recorded. The case files were mysteriously sealed, fueling decades of speculation about a possible cover-up involving powerful local figures. The release of these sealed documents has reignited interest in the Hensley mystery, prompting historians, paranormal investigators, and descendants of Marlowe's original families to revisit the old legends with renewed urgency. While some dismiss the records as the product of superstition and fear, others believe they contain hidden truths too dangerous to ignore. What remains clear is that the Hensley brothers were far more than mere children born on the frontier. They were the embodiment of a secret darkness woven into the fabric of the town itself. The documents invite us to question how much history is shaped by the stories we tell, and how much is buried beneath layers of silence, fear, and secrecy. As we turn these pages and confront the horrors within, one question lingers: what other secrets remain locked away in forgotten archives, waiting to be unearthed? And who among us dares to seek the truth? Years had passed since the Great Fire and the sealing of records, yet the shadow of the Hensley brothers never truly faded from Marlowe's memory. But in the spring of 1832, something unthinkable happened. Whispers spread that the four brothers had returned, not as children, but as something far more terrifying. It began with sightings on the outskirts of town. Farmers reported glimpses of pale figures moving through the fog, eyes glowing faintly in the moonlight. Livestock disappeared overnight, their bodies found drained of blood, limbs twisted in unnatural angles. The same eerie synchronization was noted, four shadows moving as one, silent but watching. No one dared confront them, but the fear was palpable. Town meetings grew frantic, and families began packing their belongings, hoping to escape the growing darkness. The brothers' return was not just a physical reappearance. It was as if the curse that had plagued Marlowe was reignited with a vengeance. Thomas Avery, still haunted by his earlier investigations, felt compelled to face the terror once more. He returned to Marlowe, determined to uncover the truth behind the brothers' resurrection. His journals from this period describe a man teetering on the edge of despair, driven by the need to stop a nightmare he no longer fully understood. Avery's encounters with the brothers were chilling. On one moonless night, he observed them gathered in a clearing deep in the woods, standing in a perfect circle, chanting in a low, guttural voice that seemed to twist the very air around them. Their eyes, once cold and unblinking, now shimmered with a dark intelligence that unsettled even the skeptical investigator. The brothers had grown in stature, their bodies elongated and limbs unnaturally flexible. Witnesses described how they moved with an almost supernatural grace, slipping through the forest like phantoms. No weapon could wound them. Bullets passed through shadows, and attempts to trap them failed. Local legend began to merge with reality. Some believed the brothers had become vessels for an ancient evil, bound to the cursed bloodline their parents had spoken of in hushed tones. Others whispered that they were no longer human, but something else, guardians of a secret older than Marlowe itself. The townsfolk's desperation peaked when several prominent families vanished without trace. The pattern was unmistakable. The brothers' return coincided with an escalation in disappearances and violence. Fear hardened into panic, and Marlowe's few remaining residents barricaded themselves indoors, praying for salvation that seemed ever out of reach. In a final act of defiance, Avery sought out Margaret Hensley's abandoned cabin, hoping to find clues to the brothers' nature. There, amid scattered papers and faded relics, he uncovered a crude symbol etched into the floorboards, a twisted spiral entwined with claw marks, the same mark found carved into trees near the disappearances. His journal entry from that night reads, "The brothers are bound by a darkness not of this world. To understand them is to risk becoming part of their nightmare. I fear I am too late." The brothers' return marked the beginning of Marlowe's final descent, a relentless shadow stretching over the town's soul. Their presence was a reminder that some horrors cannot be buried, and some mysteries refuse to die. As the oppressive shadow of the Hensley brothers grew heavier over Marlowe, the townsfolk reached a breaking point. Fear and desperation coalesced into a fragile resolve, one last stand against the darkness that had haunted their lives for years. The final confrontation was less a battle of weapons and more a clash of wills, a desperate fight to reclaim the town's soul. Led by Sheriff Caleb Monroe and bolstered by Thomas Avery's unwavering determination, a small band of brave men and women gathered at dusk. Their weapons were simple, muskets, pitchforks, and lanterns, but their spirits burned fiercely, fueled by grief and a fierce desire to end the nightmare once and for all. The group marched silently toward the edge of the Hensley property, the dense forest looming like a wall of blackened teeth. The air was thick with tension, each step echoing a prayer and a warning. As they crossed the threshold, an unnatural stillness fell. Birds ceased their songs, and even the wind seemed to hold its breath. Suddenly, the four brothers emerged from the shadows, their pale faces illuminated by the flickering lantern light. They moved as one, fluid and silent, eyes glowing with an eerie, unholy light. The townsfolk froze, fear tightening their throats, but Monroe's voice rang out, "This ends tonight." What followed was chaos and horror. Bullets tore through the night, but seemed to pass harmlessly through the brothers' ghostly forms. The men and women fought with desperation, their cries swallowed by the dense woods. Strange sounds filled the air, low growls, whispers of forgotten tongues, and the clash of metal on ethereal flesh. Witnesses later described the brothers as inhuman, their bodies stretching and contorting in unnatural ways. One of the town's elders recounted seeing the brothers' eyes flash with a terrible intelligence, as if they were puppeteers controlling the very forest itself. The battle was not just physical, it was a war of wills, shadows against light, fear against hope. Amid the struggle, Avery found himself face to face with Elias Hensley. Their eyes locked, and in that moment, Avery saw something unexpected. A flicker of sorrow, a trace of humanity buried deep beneath the darkness. Elias whispered a warning. "You cannot end what was never meant to be ended." Then, as suddenly as they had appeared, the brothers vanished into the night, leaving behind only silence and the acrid smell of smoke. Though the townsfolk survived the night, the cost was high. Many were injured or lost forever to the woods. The final stand had not defeated the brothers, but it had forced them into the shadows once more. Marlowe was scarred, physically and spiritually, but the fight had sparked a fragile hope that darkness was not invincible. In the aftermath, the town rebuilt slowly, haunted by memories and wary of the forest's edge. The legend of the Hensley brothers grew into myth, a cautionary tale whispered by firelight. Yet beneath the surface the question lingered. Had the brothers truly been banished, or were they merely waiting for the next shadow to fall? The final stand left Marlowe forever changed. The scars etched into its soil and hearts were deep, and the echoes of that dark chapter refused to fade with time. Though the four brothers retreated into the shadows that night, their presence lingered like a cold fog, an invisible weight pressing down on the town's collective memory. In the months and years that followed, Marlowe struggled to reclaim a sense of normalcy. Homes were rebuilt, farms replanted, and the church's steeple restored. But beneath the surface, the fear never fully lifted. The woods surrounding the town remained off limits after dark. Whispered warnings passed between neighbors about strange lights and unsettling noises that echoed through the trees. Children grew up hearing tales of the Hensley brothers, stories told in hushed tones around hearth fires, warnings against wandering too far. Many who lived through those years carried invisible wounds, sleepless nights haunted by shadows, dreams stained with the brothers' cold, unblinking eyes. The town's history became a patchwork of silence and rumor. Official records remained sealed or lost, and many preferred to forget rather than confront the darkness that once consumed them. Yet the legacy endured, through lingering distrust of outsiders, unexplained disappearances, and a pervasive unease that settled like dust on every doorstep. Descendants of the original families whispered of curses passed down through generations, of bloodlines forever marked by the events that unfolded. Some claimed to have inherited strange abilities or suffered nightmares filled with cryptic warnings. Others fled the town altogether, their names fading into obscurity. Local folklore expanded, blending fact with fiction. The Hensley brothers were said to haunt the forest at twilight, guardians of secrets too terrible to reveal. Hunters swore they could hear faint chanting carried on the wind, while farmers reported crops failing mysteriously near the old homestead. Despite the passage of nearly 2 centuries, Marlowe remains a place where darkness refuses to yield. Paranormal investigators who have visited speak of sudden drops in temperature, unexplained shadows, and the unsettling sensation of being watched. The sealed documents uncovered in recent years suggest that some truths remain buried, but not forgotten. This haunting legacy poses a question that still chills those who ponder it. How do you confront a darkness that lives not only in the forest but in the heart of a community? And when the shadows of the past stretch long into the present, can a town ever truly be free? Marlowe's story is a testament to the fragile line between myth and reality, and a reminder that some horrors endure, lurking just beyond the edge of light, waiting for the next soul brave enough to uncover them. Nearly 2 centuries after the Hensley brothers vanished into legend, their shadow still lingers over Marlowe, an invisible thread connecting past and present. In the modern age, the town remains a quiet, unassuming place, but whispers of the old horrors refuse to die. Paranormal investigators, historians, and curious visitors are drawn here, hoping to glimpse the truth hidden beneath layers of time and silence. Local residents speak cautiously about strange occurrences, unexplained cold spots in the woods, flickering lights near the ruins of the Hensley homestead, and sudden chilling gusts of wind that seem to carry whispered voices. Some claim to have seen fleeting figures moving just beyond the tree line, pale and silent, as the brothers themselves once were. In 2018, a team of paranormal researchers set up equipment around the old forest edge, capturing anomalous readings, inexplicable electromagnetic fluctuations, faint, indecipherable voices caught on audio recordings, and shadowy figures caught briefly on infrared cameras. Their footage, widely circulated online, reignited debate about the brothers' true nature. Were they merely men twisted by darkness, or something far more sinister and eternal? Genealogists tracing the Hensley lineage have uncovered odd gaps and unexplained disappearances among descendants, fueling speculation of a curse that spans generations. Some families still living in the area report nightmares, strange illnesses, and an unshakable feeling of being watched, echoes of the past reverberating through time. Marlowe's local historians hold on to the sealed documents unearthed decades ago, studying the faded writings and symbols that hint at occult practices and ancient bloodlines. The mystery invites endless questions. Were the brothers pawns of a darker force? Did their parents truly bind them with a sinister pact? And what secrets remain hidden beneath the earth, waiting to be uncovered? For many, the story of the 4 brothers is more than just history. It's a cautionary tale of how darkness can seep into a community, linger in its shadows, and infect the very land. The forest around Marlowe is now protected, but few dare to enter after dusk, wary of awakening what still waits in the darkness. Tonight, as you listen, ask yourself, what would you do if you stumbled upon the secrets buried in those woods? Would you flee in terror, or dare to confront the shadows that have haunted Marlowe for nearly 200 years? The Hensley brothers' story is far from over. Their chilling legacy continues to haunt the edges of our world, a reminder that some mysteries are never truly solved, only buried, waiting for the next brave soul to unearth the truth. As we close the chapter on the macabre mystery of the 4 Hensley brothers, countless questions remain unanswered, leaving a haunting void where certainty should be. What truly bound the brothers together? Was it blood, a curse, or something far darker? Were they victims of their own lineage, or the perpetrators of an ancient evil? And perhaps most chilling, what secrets lie buried beneath Marlowe, locked away in those sealed documents, waiting to resurface? One theory suggests the brothers were the product of a sinister pact made by their parents, Elias and Margaret Hensley, with forces beyond mortal understanding. The repeated references in letters to dark bloodlines and ancient powers hint at occult practices, possibly involving forbidden rituals intended to grant power or immortality. This theory is supported by the strange symbols found etched around the Hensley property and the reports of eerie chants carried on the wind. Another possibility is that the brothers suffered from a rare medical condition, anomalies in pigmentation, synchronous behaviors, and shared physiology noted in the sealed medical records hint at something unnatural, perhaps genetic or even parasitic in nature. Were they victims of a hereditary disease misunderstood by early 19th century medicine, twisted into legends by fear and superstition? Some historians speculate the brothers' true terror lay not in supernatural forces but in a family legacy of violence and isolation. Raised in near-complete seclusion, cut off from community and morality, the boys may have developed a collective psychosis, an unbreakable bond that blurred individual identities, creating a singular force of fear and destruction. Paranormal investigators, on the other hand, argue that the brothers transcended humanity entirely. The modern-day reports of strange electromagnetic activity, ghostly sightings, and unexplained phenomena point to entities caught between worlds, spirits bound to the earth by unfinished business, or malevolent guardians of secrets too dangerous to reveal. But beyond the theories lies a deeper question. Why has Marlowe never fully healed? The town's whispered fears, strange illnesses, and disappearances among descendants suggest that the darkness lingers, not just in the woods, but in the very blood and bones of the community. Is the curse truly broken, or is it dormant, waiting for the moment to awaken once again? As you ponder these questions, remember that history is written not just by what is known, but by what is hidden. The story of the Hensley brothers reminds us that some mysteries resist explanation, existing in the twilight between truth and legend. What do you believe? Were the brothers victims, villains, or something else entirely? Could the sealed documents hold the key to unlocking the truth, or are some secrets better left buried? Thank you for joining me on this journey into one of America's darkest mysteries. If this story captivated you, comment below with your theories or share any similar legends you've heard. Don't forget to subscribe for more forbidden histories that challenge the boundaries of the known.